The keys felt heavier than they should have in my palm. My grandmother Margaret had left me her beach house in Oregon, the place where I spent every summer learning what family actually meant. I stood on the porch, breathing in salt air and memories, thinking this was her final gift to help me start over after my divorce. I never imagined this inheritance would become a battlefield, or that the people I called family would show their true colors so fast. 2 weeks after her funeral, everything started crumbling. Before we dive into how family greed can destroy everything you hold dear, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you have ever dealt with entitled family members. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. I am Roberto, 32 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I worked as a software engineer in Seattle, pulled in a decent salary, and kept my head down. Then my wife of 5 years decided she wanted something different, someone different. And just like that, I was signing divorce papers and moving into a studio apartment that smelled like old carpet and regret. My grandmother Margaret was the only person who checked on me during that mess. She would call every Sunday, her voice warm and steady, asking if I was eating enough, sleeping okay, actually dealing with my feelings instead of burying them in work. She was 78, living alone in that beach house she had owned for 40 years, and she understood pain in a way that made you feel less alone in yours. When she passed away in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in late September, I felt like I had lost the last person who truly saw me. The funeral was small. My father, Frank, showed up with his new wife, Patricia, barely staying an hour before claiming they had dinner reservations. My older brother, Justin, came late, spent the whole time on his phone, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. That was just how they were. Present, but not really there. The real shock came during the reading of the will. Margaret's lawyer, a patient woman named Helen, who had known my grandmother for decades, sat us down in her office and went through the details. Most of it was predictable. Small donations to charities, a few personal items distributed to friends. Then Helen looked directly at me and said the house was mine, not split between Frank and his kids, not divided among grandchildren. Mine. The deed. The land. Everything. The room went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then Frank cleared his throat and said, "Well, that is wonderful, son. Your grandmother clearly trusted you." His smile did not reach his eyes. Justin just stared at me, his jaw tight, and I swear I saw something cold flicker across his face before he looked away. Patricia whispered something to Frank that I could not quite hear, but I caught the word unfair in there somewhere. Helen handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from my grandmother. "Roberto, you are the only one who ever really cared. This house holds our memories. Keep them safe. Love always, Grandma." I folded the note carefully and put it in my jacket pocket, feeling the weight of her trust settle on my shoulders. That 3-bedroom house sat right on the Oregon coast, with windows facing the Pacific Ocean. The backyard had a rose garden. My grandmother tended every spring, and the front porch had that swing where she taught me to appreciate silence and sunsets. Every summer, from the time I was 7 until I left for college, I stayed with her. We would wake up early, make pancakes with too much syrup, and walk down to the beach to collect shells. She taught me how to cook her famous pot roast, how to fix a leaky faucet, and how to recognize when someone was lying to you by watching their hands instead of their face. Those summers made me who I was. When she got sick 3 years ago, I was the one who drove down every other weekend to help. I mowed the lawn, restocked her groceries, sat with her during chemotherapy appointments while she cracked jokes to make the nurses laugh. Justin visited maybe twice that whole year. Frank called occasionally, but always had an excuse why he could not come down. But when she needed money for medical bills, they both suddenly appeared, hands out promises, flowing about how they would pay her back. They never did. 1 week after the funeral, my phone rang. It was Frank. His voice had that artificial warmth people use when they want something. "Hey, Roberto, been thinking about that house. What are your plans for it?" I told him I wanted to keep it, maybe fix it up, use it as a retreat. There was a pause. Then he said, "You know, son might be smarter to sell it. Split the money with family. Keep things fair." I felt my chest tighten. Fair. The word tasted wrong coming from him. I said, "Dad, Grandma left it to me. That was her decision." Another pause. Right. Just think about it, okay?" His voice had an edge now. 2 days later, Justin called. "No pleasantries. You are being selfish, keeping that whole house to yourself." I tried to stay calm, explain that this was what our grandmother wanted, that she made her choice for her own reasons. He cut me off. "I am the oldest. I deserve it more than you." The entitlement in his voice was so thick I almost laughed. Instead I said, "That is not how inheritance works, Justin." He called me a few names I will not repeat, and hung up. That was when the knot in my stomach started forming. I had a bad feeling this was just the beginning. The calls kept coming. Frank would text me articles about estate planning and family unity. Justin left voicemails that started polite, and ended with him yelling about how I was tearing the family apart. Patricia, Frank's wife, even sent me a long email about how families should share blessings and how keeping the house was spiritually selfish. I stopped responding after the 5th message. Meanwhile, I started making plans for the house. I hired contractors to repaint the exterior, fix the roof that had been leaking in the back bedroom, and restore the rose garden my grandmother loved. I sank $15,000 of my own savings into the project. Every nail hammered, every brushstroke of paint felt like honoring her memory. It was also the first thing that made me feel alive again after the divorce. I would drive down on Friday nights, spend the weekend working alongside the contractors, and head back to Seattle on Sunday evenings, with paint under my fingernails and peace in my chest. I imagined my future there. Maybe one day, I would have kids who could experience the same magic I did. Maybe I would retire there and spend my mornings walking the same beach paths my grandmother showed me. The house was not just wood and nails. It was a connection to the best parts of my past and a bridge to a better future. Then one Saturday afternoon in late October, I drove down for my usual weekend check on the renovation progress. The October air was crisp leaves, turning gold and orange along the highway. I pulled up to the house around 2 in the afternoon and immediately noticed Frank's silver sedan parked in the driveway. My stomach dropped. He was not supposed to be there. Nobody was. I walked in through the front door and found him in the study elbow deep in the filing cabinet, where my grandmother kept all her important documents. Papers were scattered across the desk. He jumped when he saw me, actually jumped, and tried to shuffle the documents back into a pile. "Roberto, I did not expect you today." His face was red. I asked him what he was doing. He straightened up, forcing a smile. "Just looking for some of your grandmother's things. Keepsakes, you know. Memories." I looked at the papers on the desk. Property deeds, insurance documents. Nothing sentimental about any of it. "How did you get in?" I asked. He patted his pocket. "Your grandmother gave me a spare key years ago. This was her house. I have a right to be here." The way he said it, like the will did not matter, like her explicit wishes, meant nothing, made my blood pressure spike. I held out my hand. "Give me the key." He actually laughed. "This is family property, Roberto. You cannot just lock everyone out." I stepped closer. "This is my property, legally. Give me the key, or I am calling the police." We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see him calculating whether to push back harder. Finally, he yanked the key from his pocket and threw it on the floor between us. It bounced once with a metallic clink. "You are making a mistake," he said, walking past me toward the door. "Family does not forget this kind of thing." After he left, I sat on the porch, swing shaking. That was my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and sat in the front row at my college graduation. And he had just broken into my house to rifle through documents like a common thief. The next morning I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. I installed a deadbolt on the study door. I felt sick doing it, but I could not ignore the obvious anymore. My family was not going to respect my boundaries. They were going to take what they wanted. For 2 weeks after the lock incident, everything went silent. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was eerie. I told myself maybe they finally accepted reality. Maybe they realized they could not bully me into giving up what my grandmother left me. I focused on work, picked up extra projects, and watched the house renovations progress through photos the contractors sent. The new paint made it look fresh and alive again. The roof no longer leaked. The rose bushes were pruned and ready for spring. Then, on a Tuesday evening in early November, my phone rang. Unknown number. Oregon area code. I almost did not answer. Hello? A shaky voice came through. Roberto, honey. This is Doris from next door. Doris was my grandmother's neighbor for 20 years, a sweet 70-year-old woman who baked cookies every Christmas and kept an eye on the house. Is everything all right? I asked. She hesitated. I do not want to alarm you, but there are people at your grandmother's house right now. They have a moving truck. They are taking things out. My heart stopped. Who I asked, but I already knew. It looks like your father and brother, she said. I called out to them, asked what they were doing, but they ignored me. I thought you should know. I thanked her, hung up, and immediately started throwing things in a bag. It was 7 in the evening. The drive to the coast took 4 hours. I could be there by 11 if I pushed it. I made it in 3.5, breaking every speed limit on the highway. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. When I pulled up to the house just after 10:30, everything was dark. No truck, no cars, no sign of anyone. I used my new key to unlock the door and stepped inside. The motion sensor light flickered on. I walked through each room, cataloging what was gone. The old television from the living room, 3 framed paintings my grandmother collected over the years, a vintage lamp, the antique clock from the mantel. Nothing irreplaceable, but the violation made me feel physically ill. They had broken in, stolen from me, and then just disappeared into the night like it was nothing. I called the police and filed a report. The officer who came out was sympathetic but realistic. Without proof of who took the items, there is not much we can do, he said. Change your locks again, install cameras, and document everything you own. I did exactly that. The next morning I had a security company install cameras at every entrance. If they came back, I would have evidence. But they did not come back. Not physically anyway. 4 days later I got a thick envelope in the mail from a law office I did not recognize. Inside was a notice titled, Property Sale Notification. My vision blurred as I read it. The house had been listed for sale. The seller was listed as Frank, claiming to be the rightful heir, and stating that the will was under dispute. He had already found a buyer. They had signed a preliminary contract. The sale price was $350,000. Closing was scheduled for the following week. I could not breathe. This was not real. This could not be real. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to call him. It rang 4 times before he picked up. I had my recording app running. I needed evidence. Hello. Frank's voice was casual, almost bored. I forced myself to stay calm. What did you do? I asked. What are you talking about? He knew exactly what I was talking about. I could hear it in his tone. You are selling my house, I said. The house Grandma left to me. He sighed like I was inconveniencing him. That house was not meant just for you. Your grandmother was not thinking clearly at the end. I am correcting an unfair situation. My jaw clenched. The will is legal. You cannot just decide to ignore it. He laughed. Actually laughed. I already did. House goes to closing next Tuesday. Deal is done. I gripped the phone tighter. What are you going to do with the money? There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had this smug quality that made my skin crawl. The money is going to pay for your brother's vacation. I must have misheard. What I said. Frank repeated it slowly, like I was stupid. Justin booked a 3-week tour of Europe. $45,000. He deserves a break. He works hard. I felt dizzy. Let me get this straight. You are selling the house. My grandmother left me so Justin can go on vacation. Frank did not even hesitate. That is right. You got a problem with that. Something in me snapped, but not into anger. Into clarity. I started laughing. Not a happy laugh. A cold, sharp laugh that surprised even me. No problem at all, I said. Frank went quiet. What are you planning? He asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. Nothing, I said. You and Justin have a great trip. Really? Enjoy it. I hung up before he could respond. I sat there in my apartment phone still in my hand and played back the recording, his voice admitting everything. The illegal sale, the fraudulent claim, the plan to use my inheritance for a luxury vacation. It was all there, and he had no idea what was about to hit him. The next morning I called a real estate attorney named Thomas Wright. I found him through a colleague who had used him during a property dispute. Thomas was in his mid-40s sharp and did not waste time on pleasantries. I showed up to his office at 9 in the morning with a folder full of documents. The original will with notarization. The property deed already transferred into my name. The recording of my conversation with Frank. Copies of the fraudulent sale documents Frank had filed. Thomas listened to everything, reviewing each document with careful attention. When I played him, the recording, his eyebrows went up. Your father admitted all of this on tape. I nodded. Thomas leaned back in his chair. This is cut and dry fraud. Forgery. Potentially theft. He falsified legal documents to sell property he does not own. He tapped the desk. And in Oregon, recording a conversation is legal as long as one party consents. You consented to recording your own conversation. This is admissible. I felt hope for the first time in weeks. What can we do? Thomas pulled out a notepad. First, we send an immediate cease and desist to your father and notify the buyer that the sale is fraudulent. Second, we file an injunction to stop the closing. Third, if he does not back down, we pursue criminal charges. What he did is not just unethical, it is illegal. He looked at me seriously. Are you prepared to go that far? This is your father. I did not hesitate. He chose to do this. I am just choosing to protect what is mine. Thomas drafted the letters that afternoon. We sent one to Frank, one to the real estate agent handling the sale, and one to the buyer. Each letter laid out the facts clearly. The property belonged to me. The sale was unauthorized. Any attempt to proceed would result in legal action. We also filed an emergency injunction with the court to halt the closing. The judge reviewed our evidence and granted it within 48 hours. Exactly 1 week after my conversation with Frank, Thomas called him. I sat in Thomas's office listening on speakerphone. Frank picked up on the third ring. This is Frank. His voice still had that arrogant edge. Thomas introduced himself as my attorney. I watched his expression stay professional and cold. Mr. Frank, you are currently attempting to sell a property located at 722 Shoreline Drive. Is that correct? Frank's tone shifted slightly. That is right. And who are you exactly? Thomas did not blink. I am the attorney, representing Roberto, the legal owner of that property. You have committed fraud by claiming ownership you do not have. Frank scoffed. I have every right to that house. It belonged to my mother. Thomas opened the file in front of him. Your mother's will, legally executed and notarized, left the property solely to Roberto. You are not listed as a beneficiary for this asset. Do you dispute that silence on the other end? Then Frank said, That will was not fair. I am fixing it. Thomas's voice stayed level. By falsifying documents and forging signatures. Do you understand that is a criminal offense in the state of Oregon? I could almost hear Frank's brain scrambling. I did not forge anything. Thomas hit play on the recording. Frank's voice filled the office. The money is going to pay for your brother's vacation. Justin booked a 3-week tour of Europe. $45,000. Thomas stopped the playback. That was you, was it not? Admitting that you plan to use proceeds from an illegal sale to fund a vacation, Frank's voice came back, panicked now. You cannot use that. Recording someone without permission is illegal. Thomas smiled, though Frank could not see it. In Oregon, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. Roberto consented to recording his own phone call. This is entirely legal and admissible in court. Dead silence. I imagined Frank's face going pale. Thomas continued. You have two options. Option 1, you immediately withdraw the sale, cancel all fraudulent claims, send a written apology to Roberto, and never contact him about this property again. Option 2, we proceed with criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and theft. Given the evidence, you could face between 2 and 5 years in prison, not to mention paying significant fines and restitution. Frank's voice was barely a whisper. I need time to think. Thomas did not give him any room. You have 24 hours. After that, we file charges with the district attorney's office. The clock starts now. He hung up. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Thomas looked at me. Now we wait. 18 hours later, Frank called Thomas back. I was not there for that call, but Thomas filled me in immediately after. Frank agreed to everything. He withdrew the sale listing. He sent a formal letter to the buyer apologizing for the misunderstanding and paid them $10,000 out of his own pocket for their time and trouble. He sent me a 2-sentence email that technically qualified as an apology, though the words were stiff and resentful. Most importantly, he signed a legal document promising never to make any claim on the property again. Justin had to cancel his Europe trip. Lost the deposit, which was apparently around $8,000. I did not feel bad. Not even a little. They had tried to steal my inheritance to fund a luxury vacation, and they lost. Frank and Justin stopped calling, stopped texting. I heard through extended family that they were telling people I had betrayed them, that I was selfish and ungrateful. I did not care anymore. Their version of family was conditional, transactional, and built on who could take the most. I wanted no part of it. The months that followed were quiet, in the best way. I finished the renovations on the house. The new paint gleamed in the sunlight. The roof was solid. The rose garden started showing signs of life as winter eased into early spring. I spent every weekend there, sometimes working on small projects, sometimes just sitting on the porch swing with a book and coffee listening to the ocean. Doris, the neighbor, became a good friend. She brought over casseroles, and we would sit in the kitchen trading stories about my grandmother. She told me things I never knew. How my grandmother used to bake extra bread every week and leave it on Doris's porch when her husband was sick. How she organized a neighborhood watch after a string of break-ins 15 years ago. How she always said I was the one grandchild who had a good heart. Hearing those stories made me feel connected to her in new ways. I started taking care of myself better. Therapy helped me process the divorce and the family betrayal without letting it turn me bitter. I focused on work and got promoted to senior engineer with a significant raise. I even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual conversations that reminded me there were good people out there. People who did not see relationships as transactions. People who showed up because they wanted to, not because they wanted something. The house became my refuge. I would wake up early on Saturday mornings, make pancakes the way my grandmother taught me, and take them out to the porch. I would watch the sun rise over the water and feel grateful. Not for the house itself, though I loved it, but for the clarity the whole situation gave me. I learned who people really were when something valuable was on the line. I learned that standing up for yourself, even against family, was not selfish. It was necessary. I set boundaries I should have set years ago. I stopped answering calls from people who only reached out when they needed something. I invested time in friendships that were reciprocal and genuine. I donated money to causes my grandmother cared about. I volunteered at a local community center, teaching kids basic coding skills. I built a life that felt like mine, not something I inherited or fell into, but something I actively chose. One afternoon in May, I was planting new roses in the garden when I thought about everything that happened. The betrayal stung less now. It was more like a scar, something that had healed, but left a permanent mark. I realized my grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she left me that house. She was not just giving me property. She was giving me a test. A chance to see if I would stand up for myself when it mattered. A chance to choose my own worth over keeping peace with people who did not value me. I passed that test. And in doing so, I found something more valuable than the house. I found self-respect. I found the strength to walk away from toxic people, even when they shared my blood. I found out that I could fight for what was right and win. Those lessons were the real inheritance. Looking back now, I understand that some of the deepest pain comes from the people closest to you. When strangers hurt you, it stings. When family does it, it cuts all the way through. My father and brother showed me their true priorities, and it had nothing to do with love or loyalty. It was about money and ego, and this twisted sense of entitlement that made them think they deserved something just because they wanted it. But I also learned that you do not have to accept that treatment. You do not have to smile and keep the peace while people take advantage of you. You do not have to light yourself on fire to keep others warm, especially when they would not do the same for you. Setting boundaries is not selfish. Protecting what is yours is not greedy. Standing up for yourself when people try to steamroll you is not wrong. It is survival. It is self-respect. It is the bare minimum of what you owe yourself. There is a quote I read somewhere that stuck with me. Family is supposed to be our safe place. Very often, it is the place where we find the deepest heartache. That is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. We are told family is everything. Blood is thicker than water you have to forgive because they are your relatives. But what about when your relatives are the ones causing the damage? What about when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from? You get to walk away. You get to choose peace over proximity. The house on Shoreline Drive still stands. Every time I pull into that driveway, I feel my grandmother's presence. Not in a haunting way, but in the wind chimes on the porch, and the roses blooming in the garden, and the way the sunset hits the windows just right. She gave me more than a house. She gave me proof that I was worth fighting for. She gave me a reason to stand my ground when people tried to take what was mine. And maybe most importantly, she gave me permission to let go of people who did not deserve a place in my life. I do not talk to Frank or Justin anymore. I do not hate them. I just do not have space for them. They made their choices, and I made mine. Some people never learn that love is not about what you can take from someone. It is about what you are willing to give, protect, and honor. My grandmother understood that. And now so do I. That beach house is not just my inheritance. It is my proof. Proof that I was strong enough to stand alone when I had to. Proof that I could face down family pressure and legal threats and come out the other side still standing. Proof that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be a doormat even when people try to convince you that is what family means. The house will stay in my name. Maybe one day I will have children who make memories there the way I did. Maybe I will retire there and spend my final years walking the beach at sunrise. Or maybe I will just keep it as a weekend sanctuary, a place to remember where I came from and who I chose to become. Whatever happens, it will be my choice, and that is the real gift my grandmother left me. Not the property, the power to choose my own path and protect it fiercely when others try to take it away. So if you are watching this, and you have ever had family treat you like an ATM or a doormat, if you have ever been made to feel selfish for having boundaries, if you have ever been told you are wrong for protecting what is rightfully yours, I want you to know something. You are not the problem. Standing up for yourself does not make you the bad guy. Sometimes the people who call you selfish are just mad that you stopped letting them use you. And that is okay. Let them be mad. Your peace is worth more than their approval. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who felt entitled to something that was not theirs? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that like button if you believe setting boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary. Subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength when people test you. And share this with anyone who needs to hear that protecting yourself is not wrong, it is survival. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you are worth fighting for, even when the fight is against people you love. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember that the best inheritance anyone can give you is the courage to stand up for what is right.